Welcome to In Studio from Simply Timeless. I'm Jay Daniels. This week we bring you a recent interview featuring vocalist Lauren Henderson and pianist Sullivan Fortner. Their fifth release together, The Songbook Session, is set to be released on April 24th. But the story of Lauren Henderson and Sullivan Fortner doesn't begin there. During this interview, you're going to hear about their early musical experiences, but you'll also hear about a chance visit with friends in New York that spawned the beginning of their musical collaboration. Here's Lauren Henderson.
Some of my first experiences were at home. My father and my grandfather were huge jazz aficionados, and I grew up listening to a lot of great singers and instrumentalists, lots of great horn players in the house, and in church as well. I grew up Episcopalian. So we would study lots of hymns, and when I was about 12 or 13, they brought in a gospel choir, and that was a wonderful experience for me as well. So I really started to open up and take a liking to singing and voice.
Was there a particular feeling or a particular way that the music made you feel even at that early age?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, recently I was talking with my parents about the first time that I heard music and I felt like crying. And I remember my parents taking me to see Porgy and Bess as a young child. And I remember watching it over the balcony and being struck with this really strong emotion and joy, but also having tears brought to my eyes, but not being old enough and mature enough to really understand why or what was making me feel that way. And it's a really beautiful memory of mine.
And obviously you have continued with music as a career since then. You went to Wheaton College. You have degrees in both music and Hispanic studies. For my own sake, why Hispanic studies? What really made you connect with that form of study?
My grandfather was born in Panama in Central America, so it is a part of my family and my culture and my background. And I didn't grow up with that being a strong influence in the house, but as I started to travel and taking different journeys, whether it's from school and studying abroad, both for my master's and for my undergraduate degree, I studied abroad. So I really connected with the culture. We also have family living in Panama, so I wanted to continue with that interest. And it really goes hand in hand with music, especially voice, because I was studying classical music in undergrad at Wheaton. And so we'd study in different languages, and it was very helpful as well.
Who were some of your favorite artists? And this can be, classical, jazz. Who were the ones who had an impact upon your musical talents?
Sure. I grew up listening to a lot of Billie Holiday, a lot of Ella Fitzgerald, and a lot of Sarah Vaughan. And then probably in middle school, I started hearing a lot more Carmen McRae. And I will say that when I started to discover my voice and my sound, when I moved to New York City, a lot of people would say that my phrasing seemed like I was influenced by Shirley Horn, who is now one of my biggest influences. And I have to credit her for a lot of my interpretation and approach to different standards, for sure.
And I didn't necessarily hear Shirley when I was listening to your recordings. I think as humans, we try to say, well, you sound like, or you perform similarly to this artist. And I think it's nice when I'm unable to really find a good comparison. Although, when I was listening, I said, she really should look at some Shirley Horn songs if she hasn't already. Have you ever heard Shirley's recording? It was an Irving Berlin song, I Got Lost in His Arms. Have you heard her recording of that?
Yes, absolutely. Sullivan and I both love Shirley Horn, so I've listened to, I think, all of her recordings that I have access to.
And you mentioned Sullivan Fortner, who is also on our call today, suffering in Miami, Florida. God bless you, Sullivan. You grew up in New Orleans, and that is certainly a mecca for jazz lovers all around the world, more or less the birthplace of what we call jazz music. You also had some similar upbringings as far as how you first heard music as a child. Tell us about those, if you would.
both my mom and my dad were both heavy in the gospel, and they were heavy in R&B music. So I grew up with not only every gospel choir album from the 80s and the 90s, you know, contemporary gospel mostly, you know, not really a whole lot of traditional gospel unless I was for church and stuff. From pretty much anything contemporary, you know, Kirk Franklin, Donald Lawrence, Walter and Edwin Hawkins, Thomas Whitfield, Take Six. I remember listening to a lot of Take Six and listening to a lot of different choirs. Choir music was what I grew up listening to with my mom. You know, L.A. Mass Choir, it was a Los Angeles Mass Choir, New Jersey Mass Choir. Pretty much every choir from every city, every major city in the United States had a major choir. So that, and then my dad was really into old school R&B. So I got like Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder, I got Otis Redding, I got the Isley Brothers. I mean, just the list goes on and on for that, Curtis Mayfield, that sound, you know, Temptations, you know. My earliest memories is listening to those kinds of records and then experiencing live performances from my mom and her singing group. So my mom had her brothers and sisters. My whole family sings on my mom's side. And they used to rehearse every week. Even if they didn't have a show or performance, they would just rehearse. And they would rehearse one song for like 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I remember hearing and understanding harmony from a vocal standpoint when I was little. And I just remember just being just inundated with voice. And I think that's probably why the relationship I have with singers is what it is, because that's my beginnings of music, just understanding the connection between vocalists alone. Just how the alto line relates to the soprano line, how the soprano line relates to the tenor line, and thus and such, so forth. And when they found out that I was musically inclined, one day they were singing something and they were singing a part wrong, and I said, "That's not right." I was like 3 or 4 years old. I said, "What you're singing's not right. The alto line isn't right." It's like, "Oh boy, shut up! You don't know what you're talking about." So they went back and they listened to it and they found out that what I was singing was right. And it was like, okay, well, wow, that's interesting. He's calling. We've been listening to this song for thus and such and singing this song for how long? And this boy can hear it after like 1 or 2 hearings. And that was it.
Yeah, I read a story somewhere. There was someone playing organ at a church. You heard is there a story behind that? Because I think it was a Wikipedia article of all places that said that Sullivan Fortner was inspired by a lady playing organ at a church meeting. What's the story behind that?
So the lady, she was the choir director, and she was basically the minister of music at the church I grew up in. Her name was Betty Wilkerson, or is. She's still around and she still plays, you know. But I had a huge crush on her. She had like this like golden brown skin with like, and she smelled like cocoa butter, and she had this long blonde hair, and you know, she was always made up. She was just a beautiful lady. She still is to this day. And I was just like, my little 3 or 4 year old heart was like, whenever I saw her, whenever I was around her. So one day she told me, "Say, come sit on the organ next to me. I'll show you, like, you can take a look at what," because I would just sit and just watch her play. You know, I sat next to her on the organ, and then I would start mimicking her. I would start mimicking what I saw her do, like some of her hand motions and certain ways that she would move her hands around the keyboard. I would mimic that. I would climb on top of a banister. I would climb on top of the television, you know, those televisions that sit on the floor. I'll climb on top of those and just beat out different rhythms, and go to climb on the countertops and beat out different rhythms from the songs they sung at church on Sundays. Yes, she was and still is a major influence in how I approach playing for sure.
When you were describing this woman just now, I said, "Okay, Sullivan, remember, it's a family program. Watch what you say now."
I'm doing, I'm trying to. I mean, it wasn't that kind of crush. It was just like a little kitty, lovey-dovey. I want to be around her kind of crush.
It's funny how our experiences all brought us to where we are now, and both of you eventually ended up in the New York area. I want to talk about when the two of you first met. The first collaborative album that you all did was Lauren's self-titled work back in 2011. And Lauren, I'll let you start that story if you could.
Okay, I'll start. And if I can remember, it's been a while.
9 years, I know, yeah.
Yeah, and so I moved to New York City. I knew another pianist that I met at undergrad in Massachusetts, Alex Brown. And he was my only connection to the jazz scene in New York, because at Wheaton, you don't have as many students who go off and pursue music professionally. It's not a conservatory. And a lot of people pursue education or maybe ethnomusicology and the study of music and culture. So I slowly had an interest for music and performing, but I really didn't think it was something that I would be able to realistically do, because it's a competitive scene. I didn't go to a conservatory. I didn't have an excellent or advanced understanding of technique and music theory at the time. So I did know Alex, and I love jazz from an early age. So I would gravitate to clubs and to different people on the scene. And Alex had a party, and at this party I met Sullivan's roommate, who was a drummer. And after that we kept in touch, and he said, you should meet my roommate. I think you'll really get along well with him, and he's a pianist. So I met Sullivan at his apartment in New York City. I think we found each other entertaining from the beginning, I would say. I grew up in Massachusetts, New England, and I hadn't ventured out yet. He was the first person that I met and got to know very well from Louisiana, and I think we had a lot of fun with each other in the beginning, and he quickly became, not only my best friend, but family to me, and, that hasn't changed, so.
So nice.
Somebody get him a box of Kleenex, please.
I feel like I'm on Oprah now.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, boy.
Sullivan, I take it that you'd agree with her account of how you two met then.
Oh, yeah, it's all true. I remember, because I think what ended up happening, how it happened, I think Jesse wanted to get our Fender Rhodes fixed.
Right.
And yeah, so I bought this Fender Rhodes on Craigslist, and it had a buzzing sound, and he found this technician downtown New York. So he took the Rhodes down to this technician, but of course, when he got to the technician's office, the technician wasn't there. Apparently, he was on vacation. So they ended up leaving the Fender Rhodes at Lauren's apartment in the financial district. And so out of just pretty much say thank you to Lauren for holding our Rhodes there, Jesse invited her to our house for dinner. And this was the first time I had met her. Jesse told me, I think that day, the day of the dinner, he said, I'm making dinner for a friend of mine who's got our Rhodes at her house, and we're gonna have dinner with her, and you'll have a good time with her. She's a nice looking girl. It'll be good for you to meet somebody that's pretty. Because apparently I only hung around a bunch of ugly people. So
tell us how you really feel about it, man.
Well, that's what I said. I was like, well, thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it. So I remember Jesse, the guy's roommate, I'm calling names, excuse that, but my roommate's name was Jesse, and Jesse wanted to make a whole chicken and he wanted mashed potatoes. I remember mashed potatoes, and I remember telling Jesse, I was like, look, if you're gonna cook the chicken on the George Foreman grill, you have to cut the chicken. You can't put a whole chicken on the George Foreman grill and expect the whole thing to cook in like 30 minutes. That's not how chicken works. So we got into this huge argument before Lauren came to the house. You know, it's just like, I mean, the thinking back on it, like, you just like, how can it's amazing how like random days in your life turn out to be like monumental days.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just like it was just a random day. You know what I mean? And who would have thought that 9 years later me and Lauren would still be friends. We would still be talking and we would still be recording. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just one of those things that's divinely orchestrated. It happened exactly the way it was supposed to.
And all I can say is this: when you're planning to make chicken and mashed potatoes again, my phone better get a call.
Oh, absolutely.
Chick-fil-A and KFC do not cut it, okay? There is no good fried chicken, in the Northeast. I have not found much good fried chicken up here.
You are absolutely right about that. You are absolutely right about that.
Always trust the big man when it comes to food taste, all right?
I remember the first time I went to Lauren's house in Boston with Marblehead, and I met her grandmother. Remember this?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And they asked me what I wanted to eat, and I said I wanted some fried chicken. And it's like, no, we don't eat. There's no good fried chicken spots over here. So I went to Popeyes. I bought like some Popeyes chicken for them and brought it to their house. And Lauren's grandmother flipped. She's like, this is the best fried chicken I've ever had in my life. And I'm like, from Popeyes? Like, oh, no.
Louisiana Fair right there, man.
What have y'all been feeding this poor woman?
I love that. And since then, she would always ask for Sullivan to visit and play the piano, of course, when he came. And she would love to have fried chicken with him.
It's probably gotten to the point, I don't care if you come, Lauren, but tell Sullivan come see me sometime.
Yeah,
Bring that fried chicken.
My
That's right.
parents, too.
Now, I don't know what it is. Every conversation I get into, somehow food comes up. I talked to a woman from T-Mobile in South Carolina. She's like, I can't wait to go out and eat some good food again. I'm sick of being at home.
Makes the world a better place.
Well, as far as hearty musical selections, you all have certainly connected over a lot, and that was in 2011. The first project was with, bassist Ben Leifer and drummer Jesse Simpson. Now, is that the same Jesse that you're talking about right there?
Yes.
Exact same Jesse.
So we know who this name of Jesse is now.
There you go.
Now, I want to talk about your latest project, which you talk about comfort food like fried chicken. These are just good songs right here, best of the best. The album opens with one of my favorites, a song called While We're Young. Not many people record that. There are not many recordings of that, compared to others. And all three of us, I think, are in the same general age range. We're fairly young. How is it that both of you have such a love for these standards that are included on the album? We'll start with Lauren.
These standards are songs that I grew up with, and I actually have a lot of wonderful memories with Sullivan watching musicals. I love musicals, and I love reinterpreting these great standards, many of which come from iconic musicals. And while I love songwriting and composing, and on my next project, I'm sure I will reintroduce new compositions and original music. But it's great to pay homage to these classics and these major influences for all of us.
Sullivan, same question.
A lot of the language of the music that we play, jazz, kind of stems from the American Songbook. They teach us the relationship between a story and a melody, the lyrics and the melody. They teach us about harmony. They teach us about movement. They teach us about simplicity of melody. They give us a glimpse, just like the blues, they give us a glimpse into America and American literature and how America works, from a folk place. A lot of folk influence, a lot of, it's just so much that you get from those songs, and they're written correctly, like Barry Harris says. They're written correctly.
He's a good man.
So you'll learn how to write the more you study songs from the American Songbook.
How did both of you approach this collaboration? Whose idea, I suppose, was it?
For the past 9 years, I have to give Sullivan as much credit as I possibly can. And it's sort of just, recording with Sullivan is sort of, for me, as sure as, going to meet him for lunch or anything else. I'm very attached to him, obviously, and he's such a major part of our interpretation of standards or original music. He's frequently the first person I send anything I write to. So, it was just time for the next project, and we have another one that we have to kind of figure out on the horizon as well. I have more music to show him. So this particular project, generally how it works is I approach him and say, I'm thinking about doing a series of standards or a series of originals or this sort of concept. And then we sit down together, hopefully before we're in the studio. Of course, before the pandemic, we both had plans for touring this year, and we're trying to work our schedules together. So there is a bit of a silver lining to be able to sit down and speak with you and maybe have more time to plan our next endeavors. But we sat down, I told him what I was thinking about. I frequently sent him, maybe 20 songs. And then I think for me, it's very important for the entire band to be committed to the songs that we're doing, because I don't like forcing people to connect to music that they're not connecting to. And so, between the two of us, we narrowed that down and what songs resonate with us and that we thought that we could interpret well, and we got into the studio.
And I want to talk about that musical relationship between both of you. You're not only working together as a team in regards to being a duo, but also as an ensemble with the side players. But I want to talk about the two of you in a musical setting. Sullivan, you brought up an interesting point earlier when you were growing up in church, being able to learn how each of the parts work with each other, sopranos and altos, tenors and basses, and really finding ways that you could best lend your voice to accompany them, to provide a space. Would you say that you're a good listener?
I would say that listening is definitely a craft that I'm learning more and more about every day. Like the more and more I play music, the more and more I feel that my ears are being trained. And that's a skill, even if you have like perfect pitch or whatever, exact recall, that's a skill that you'll always be, fine tuning, so to speak. The ear to me is the world. it's the glasses for music, so to speak. It's the microscope for music. And the more tuned you are, the more in depth you are to being able to hear, the better, and the more aware you are of the nuances and the little fine things that make up what it is exactly that you're feeling, the better off you are as a musician.
Listening to each other, there has to be a certain sort of chemistry and understanding, and I don't think it would apply in this way. Okay, Sullivan, you're here, and I'm over here. I think there is a great blending, being able to find where each other fits in the space. The chemistry between both of you, Lauren, was that something that came naturally, or did you have to learn what each other's role was in this musical partnership?
I think that from the beginning, we've had a very strong chemistry. I will say, and I think Sullivan agrees, for me, one thing that really stood out for me, especially because I haven't had a lot of formal instruction. We had a lesson with Michael Kanan, and I feel like it was almost like couples therapy. You know, he observed us and how we interact, which had been working for us for years. This wasn't, I mean, it wasn't recent, but it can't be more than 4 years ago that we did this.
Yeah.
So we were pretty far along with our collaborations to date when we went to this lesson with Michael, and it was wonderful because I think that we now interact with each other, and of course I incorporated in any musical situation that I'm into, regardless of who I'm collaborating with at the time. But it really taught me to listen and interact and use my body completely as my instrument. So showing how I feel, whether it's how I'm counting things off or even taking the time. It's okay to take the time and say, you know, this is how I'm feeling and this is why, and go with me. I think a lot of times we can rest on the things that come to us naturally and rest on our natural skill. And I do think we have a natural connection, just him knowing me through good and bad times. He can read on my facial expressions on stage, things that other people might not know that's going on. And he always responds well to that and supports me well. But I think this has taught me to be a better communicator and just connect on a different level when we have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that lesson in particular, it's weird because, like, I had been playing with Lauren. What was that, like maybe like three or 4 years prior to that,
Right.
and having Michael there, or having another, like with anything, having another set of ears and eyes watching, it kind of makes you aware of certain nuances that you wouldn't have otherwise figured out on your own. So what Michael, having that type of mentorship with somebody like him, taught me that, okay, well, when she does this, then you need to do this. Her voice has these qualities, rather than thinking of yourself, you know, like enhancing a quality. Think of it as creating a dialogue with those qualities. Because a lot of times I think with the relationship between singers and pianists is that a lot of times piano players are looked on as just an accompaniment and just like supplying like an underlying situation for a singer to just kind of just trample over. But when you create a dialogue with a singer, or when you create a dialogue with another musician, the music stops becoming a lecture.
Right.
And it becomes more conversational.
Yeah.
It allows more for interaction. And it allows more for like sharing ideas. So since sometimes she won't feel like it's all on her, it's like totally on her to basically tell us what we should do. We are actually equally involved with the music.
Yes.
So whenever I play with somebody like Lauren, or I play with somebody like Cecile or Dee Dee Bridgewater, or whoever, it's like, how do I make them feel like they're not doing all the work? How do I make them feel like I'm a collaborator as opposed to just a piano player in a rhythm section, or just somebody that's supplying chords?
Right.
I think through that, it makes Lauren feel a little bit more comfortable playing with somebody like me, as you know, than maybe on the first 2 records that we did. You know.
But it's a learning process over the course of time.
I mean, it's like any relationship. You know, you go through these type of you go through these types of, not really obstacles, but you go through these learning processes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you can spend every day for a year with somebody, and then each day you learn something completely different.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've known Lauren for 9.5 years, and like, if I guarantee you, if I hang out with her tomorrow, I'd find out something different about her that I didn't know. You know what I mean? And that's like, and then when you're surrounded by other people who are watching the interaction and letting you know that, you know, watching, like being around in-laws or being around, somebody, you start to kind of see, oh, she said this, you should do this. Like, oh, okay. Now I didn't know that she, I didn't know that she would respond in that way. Right. If I would respond like this. And it's just, you get into this whole, I don't know if I'm rambling. I'm probably rambling.
Your ramblings are worth listening to. There are some people I'm like, will you please just shut up?
Yeah.
This album, the Songbook Session, as we have alluded to here during this conversation, these songs have been recorded many times. So how do you think your interpretations, Lauren, with Sullivan on these songs and the ensemble, how do you think your recordings make a positive contribution to the current conversation in jazz music?
That's very interesting. Sullivan and I have had this conversation, not specifically, but a conversation that we recently had was about our identities as artists and how other people perceive us, how we perceive ourselves. And one thing that's been very important to me over the past 4 years, I can say I've really been trying to work on this, and it's something that I still work on, but it's accepting my voice and my identity and who I am, not trying to conform or compare myself to other people, because I can only be me, and I can only be authentic if I'm doing what's true to myself and true to what I'm feeling, and highlights my abilities as a storyteller and a vocalist. And I think that we're definitely going for that in this record, and that's what we'll continue to go for moving forward. And I think that's the best contribution that you can give to the jazz scene. Sincerity, authenticity, and just being completely honest.
Mm-hmm. And being honest with the people that you're playing with. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the things that may be a little bit different, I'm not sure, about the way that we record particularly, is that you hear years of a friendship. So there's always this underlying feeling of love when we play. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, and I guess that even plays a part in some of the song selections. Yes. The songs that we pick, it kind of, even over the years, I would say, it kind of, every song that we've done reflects our friendship in a way. And not just me and Lauren's friendship, but the friendship that we have among the people that we're playing with too. Mm-hmm. Thinking of one record in particular, the record was a Madrugada when we did with Bean.
Yes, yeah.
With Jeremy Clemens and Amin Salim. There's some songs on there that really reflect not just me and Lauren's friendship, but my friendship with Amin. So I played with Amin and Roy Hargrove's band for 7 years, and there's certain songs that just fit well with the band that we're playing in, because it reflects the amount of time that we spend with each other off the bandstand and away from music.
Right.
They all kind of have that type of connection. Let me dig into something else while we're here, and I know we have just a few minutes left. Whether it's, playing together as a duo, whether you're doing whatever your performance state is, people who are and are not persons of faith have often said that playing music, and especially jazz music, is often seen as a spiritual experience. I'd like to hear from both of you. What do you think of that? Do you view your musical performance those times as spiritual experiences?
I absolutely do. And I think it's really a privilege and a blessing if you can tap into that when you're performing. That's another thing, just being present and being in the moment can be so beautiful, and really owning all of the emotions that come to you in a performance and the surprises. A lot of times, and Sullivan's been there with me on many of these days where I might do something and I'm trying my best to be present and in the moment, and I don't feel great about it, and then I'll get off of the stage and it really resonated with someone and it spoke to them in a way that I could have never imagined, and then vice versa, where it might have been really special for me, but maybe not for other people, and that's fine. That's totally fine, but it's all beautiful, wonderful experience, and really feeling like I can have the freedom and the liberty to interpret music without the influences that I don't want to introduce, and anything that I do want to come in is welcome, and having the flexibility and the alacrity to do so. It's just a privilege, and it's something that I try to take on without any trepidation, and just really soak myself in that experience.
I feel like music is one of the most, if not the most divine gift that was given to us, because it crosses language barriers. It crosses human emotions. It even surpasses it. Certain things we can't express through words, we can express through music, you know. And when you have a situation where you are when you're in a band with people who actually have a like-minded way of how they view the music, it's almost like the scripture that says, where two or three are gathered together, there I am in the midst. It's that same kind of like mindset where everybody just kind of comes together to a focus point. And if we agree that we have a mission and we're accomplishing this mission when we play, there's something that happens that's miraculous. And I think that music has the ability to do that more than, I think, anything.
Lauren Henderson and Sullivan Fortner are featured guests for this week's In Studio from Simply Timeless. The name of the album is The Songbook Session, and it's available for pre-order with a release date of April 24th. More information available at laurenhendersonmusic.com. Special thanks to Lauren and Sullivan for their insight, and especially for the laughs, but also thanks to Lydia Liebman for helping to bring this together. Until next time, I'm Jay Daniels, thanking you for joining us in studio.